job, man.
That's fine.
As a kid growing up in suburban Pittsburgh, I had a chance to explore nature with my neighbor, Chuck. And we learned where all the big spiders were and became quite infected by their ferocious acrobatic skills and how quickly they responded. And then soon after we reached school age, we started exploring a creek area not too far from our homes and became, again, amazed at the diversity and beauty of the creek creatures, salamanders, turtles, frogs, fish, birds. And through that experience, learned what I then came to appreciate even more so when I read Silent Spring by Rachel Carson in high school, and that is how important, you might say precious, vital to our ability to live on Earth is our environment and how vulnerable that is to human activity. Even back in the 50s and 60s, our technology was threatening our nature, the nature that I had come so much to admire and cherish. So when it came time to choose a career, I unusually took up engineering, despite my interest in nature. And yet, the course of engineering I pursued was industrial engineering, which has an unusual degree of parallel concepts with ecology, in that both deal with systems. That is, how systems interact, how components of systems interact, and how important the exchange of information, material, and energy is among those components. That led me into graduate school, looking into a world logistics meeting human needs with the world's resources challenge that was taken up by Buckminster Fuller. That program of academic pursuit then led me into my thesis, which dealt with industrial capitalism and how negligent activities of capitalism that were not part of the market exchange of values was contributing to problems of humans, environmental problems, health problems, to a certain extent wealth distribution problems, and suffering of humanity. And that has then led to the discovery of this very important book, Limits to Growth, that was very popular back in the early 70s when I was doing this work. Limits to Growth looked at computer modeling of how human use of resources and the technology available for human use of resources can support humanity or not, depending upon the variables assumed. And much to my surprise, within my lifetime, these limits have come to bear. Climate change being the premier issue that now threatens humanity. We have, of course, melting glaciers, which are adding to sea level rise. We have extreme weather conditions, which cause drought and flooding. Drought leads to wildfires. Wildfires are predicted to be increasing at as much as 50% by mid-century, and they're already outpacing all previous periods of wildfire destruction. At the same time, we are facing a fossil fuel industry that's being promoted by our government, even though our government has been warned by the Department of Defense some 10 years ago that climate change is a national security issue. Now, how is it that the same government can be supporting fossil fuel development at the rate of at least $10 billion in subsidies a year, by some estimates as high as 5 times that, depending upon what you include, and yet at the same time be warned by their own Department of Defense that the very problems that are caused by the combustion of fossil fuels are a national security issue? We have got to come to grips with this very deep conflict in our national policy. And this has particular significance in coastal Georgia because we now face 2 major problems that are directly related to the excesses of pursuit of fossil fuels. One is a 210-mile pipeline that's proposed to run from roughly the Augusta area down through coastal Georgia into Jacksonville, Florida. And after studying this for several months, I cannot find any justifiable reason for it. At the same time, we're also facing offshore drilling, which is a dubious venture considering our current fossil fuel situation. Alternative energy has been thriving the last few years. I have read online that residential use of solar energy has been doubling every 2 years. It's growing at a very rapid rate because costs have come down and there's a demand for clean energy. And even though that demand is supported by our government at 1/6 the rate or less of fossil fuels, it's still thriving. What we need to do is expand the use of clean energy and diminish the use of fossil fuels, and yet our current policies are doing exactly the opposite. By the end of last year, the United States was exporting 5 million barrels a day of oil products. And at the same time, we have a very flat growth rate in the demand for fossil fuels in this country, thanks to efficiency and clean energy coming into the market and so forth. So really, the only money to be made in fossil fuel these days is to export it. I ask all of you, as members of the coastal region of Georgia and active citizens, do you really want to suffer the consequences of a BP-like oil spill off of our shores to indulge the fossil fuel industry's desire to export and profit from exporting fossil fuels? I don't think that has anything to do with public interest of our region, and I don't think it has anything to do with public interest of the United States, for that matter. So I ask all of you to think about this in terms of your interests in your daily life. We have an abundance of quality natural resources in this region, I would say unmatched in the United States among coastal regions. Our quality of life, our property values, our enjoyment of daily life, our economy, for that matter. There's 40,000 people employed in nature-based businesses just within the 6 coastal counties of Georgia. That's $2 billion a year in business. We need you to speak out about these issues. This is not going to happen by delegating it to somebody else. We need the citizens to speak out on 3 things. One is eliminate subsidies for fossil fuels, oppose the offshore drilling and the pipeline proposed for coastal Georgia, and stay involved in these issues. Exercise your privileges and your obligations as citizens of the United States, citizens of coastal Georgia, and prevent this bad stuff from happening. The best way to put this, I think, is that the oil companies and the business interests have money. We have voices. And unless we exercise our voices as members of our democracy, we are failing and we are giving up something that is very important to our way of life. I urge you all to get involved and stay involved. Thank you.